The rain came down hard that night in the city of Okanda. The sky was dark, the thunder loud, and the streets already flooding with water. Inside a small house on the edge of town, another storm was breaking. Adissa stood in the middle of the living room, her hands trembling, her eyes wet with tears that matched the rain outside. She begged her husband Chaik in a voice that shook with fear and love, "Please, let's not fight like this. I am your wife, your partner. Treat me with kindness, not anger." But his face was cold, his eyes sharp like a blade. Chaik's voice rose above the thunder. "Adissa, you think I need you? You think without you my life will stop? You are nothing here." His words cut deeper than the storm outside. The walls of the house echoed with his cruelty. Adissa's chest tightened, her heart breaking as she tried to understand how the man she once loved could now look at her with so much hatred. The rain hit the windows harder, like it wanted to break in. Adissa's tears mixed with the sound of thunder, her voice weak, "Chaik, please." But the man standing before her had no softness left in him.
Chaik's anger reached its peak. His eyes were burning, his chest rising and falling like a man ready for war. Adissa stood frozen, hoping he would calm down, but instead he stormed to the front door and pulled it wide open. The wind howled inside, carrying sheets of rain that drenched the floor. Without even thinking twice, he grabbed her by the arm and shoved her out into the night. Adissa's body stumbled, her bare feet landing hard on the wet ground. The cold water splashed up her legs as the storm swallowed her. "You are nothing without me." Chaik's voice thundered almost louder than the sky. His words struck her deeper than the push. They pierced her heart and left her standing there, shaking in the downpour. Her wrapper was soaked instantly, clinging to her skin, heavy and uncomfortable. The rain mixed with her tears until she could no longer tell which was which. She reached out a trembling hand toward him, but the door slammed shut in her face with a sound that cut through the storm like a knife. Adissa's heart broke into pieces right there on the muddy ground. She could hear his footsteps retreating inside, the house that once felt like home now closing her out forever. The rain beat down on her head, on her shoulders, as if the sky itself was punishing her too. Her hair stuck to her face, her lips quivered, and her body trembled under the cold. She hugged herself tightly, whispering through sobs, "Why, Chaik? Why would you do this to me?" But no answer came, only the sound of thunder rolling and the water rushing along the streets. Every part of her body ached, but the pain in her heart was worse. The man she gave her love, her time, her youth, had thrown her away like nothing. Standing there, dripping wet and abandoned, she felt the cruelest truth of all. She was alone in the storm, left to
Adissa
fight
stepped
for her
into
life.
the dark street with nothing on her feet but mud and rain. The water was cold, seeping into her bones, making every movement slow and painful. The road was slippery, her wrapper heavy against her skin, pulling her down as if the storm wanted to bury her. Still, she lifted one foot after the other, each step sinking into the dirt. Her hair clung to her face, dripping water into her eyes, but she didn't stop. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice kept whispering, "Keep moving. Don't break. Don't stop now." The night felt endless. Streetlights flickered in the distance, casting shadows on the puddles around her. Dogs barked from far-off compounds, their sounds sharp in the silence between thunder. The city that once looked so bright and alive now felt like a ghost town. Adissa hugged her arms around her chest, shivering as the rain slapped against her skin, harder with every gust of wind. Her lips quivered and her throat was dry, but she kept whispering to herself like a prayer. "I will survive this. I will not fall here." Her bare feet hurt. Sharp stones and hidden sticks scratched her skin, but she pushed through the pain. Every time her body begged her to stop, she remembered the door slamming in her face, the voice of Chaik calling her nothing. That memory gave her strength, though it burned inside. She would not let his cruelty be the end of her story. With each step, Adissa felt the weight of her broken heart pressing on her chest. Yet she also felt something else, something rising quietly within her. It was not anger, not yet. It was the stubborn will to keep going, to refuse defeat. She didn't know where the road was taking her. She didn't know if safety waited ahead or just more darkness. But as long as her legs could move, she would not stop. The storm could drench her body, but it would not drown her spirit. The road stretched endlessly before Adissa, dark and lonely under the heavy storm. Her legs felt weak, her body numb from the cold, but she forced herself forward. Suddenly, two bright headlights cut through the curtain of rain. The glow was blinding at first, making her raise her shaky hand to shield her eyes. The deep hum of an engine grew louder as a sleek black car slowed down beside her. For a moment her heart raced with fear. She didn't know if this was danger or rescue. The world had already shown her so much cruelty tonight. The car rolled to a gentle stop, its tires splashing the puddles along the muddy road. The tinted window slowly lowered, and warm light spilled out from the inside. Through the rain she saw the outline of a man. His voice came deep, steady, and calm, cutting through the storm like a lifeline. "Do you need help?" Adissa froze. Her lips parted but no words came. She looked at herself, soaked to the skin, hair clinging to her face, bare feet covered in mud. Shame and fear tangled inside her chest. Would this stranger laugh at her, reject her, or harm her? Yet in his voice she heard no mockery, no threat, only concern. Her throat tightened as tears rushed back to her eyes. The storm was too loud, but she managed to whisper, "Please." It was all she could say. That one word carried her pain, her exhaustion, her silent cry for someone, anyone, to see her as human again. The man leaned a little closer, his face now clear under the glow from the dashboard lights. His eyes held warmth, not pity. "Come inside. You shouldn't be out here in this storm," he said gently. Adissa hesitated for just a second, then her tired hands gripped the door handle. The car was warm, safe, and inviting. She slid inside slowly, her body trembling, her heart pounding with fear and relief all at once. For the first time that night, the storm outside seemed just a little less cruel. Inside the car, Adissa sat quietly, her body still shivering from the cold. The soft leather seat felt strange under her soaked clothes, but at least it was dry and warm. The man reached over to turn the heater on, and soon the car filled with gentle warmth. He glanced at her, not with judgment but with calm patience, as if he understood her silence. After a moment he spoke in a steady, reassuring voice. "My name is Oba," he said. "I live here in Okanda. Don't be afraid. You're safe with me." Adissa lowered her eyes, still hugging her arms tightly around herself. She wanted to believe him, but the pain of what she had just been through made her cautious. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice cracked, but Oba didn't press her for more. Instead, he reached into the back seat and pulled out a clean blanket. He held it out gently, waiting until she took it. The moment she wrapped it around herself, a small sigh escaped her lips, the first bit of relief she had felt all night. The rain pounded harder against the windows, but inside the car, the world felt different, soft, safe, almost unreal. Oba drove slowly, his hands steady on the wheel, but his eyes flicked toward her every now and then, making sure she was comfortable. There was no pity in his gaze, only compassion, as though he saw her not as a broken woman but as someone who deserved dignity. After a long silence, Oba spoke again, his tone gentle. "Everyone deserves kindness, especially on nights like this." Those words sank deep into Adissa's heart. For so long she had been treated as less, spoken to with cruelty, pushed aside like nothing. But here was a stranger, offering warmth without asking for anything in return. Adissa's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. They were not the tears of pain or humiliation. They were the tears of a woman finally reminded that she was still human, still worthy of care. In that moment, sitting in Oba's car wrapped in a blanket, the car pulled up in front of a beautiful house, its lights glowing warmly against the dark, stormy night. The compound gate opened smoothly, and for a moment Adissa stared in disbelief. The place looked like something out of a dream. Tall pillars, wide verandas, and gardens that even the heavy rain could not hide. Her heart raced. She had never been brought to such a place before, and fear tugged at her chest. But when she turned her eyes toward Oba, she found calmness there. Oba stepped out first, opening his umbrella before walking around to her side. He opened the door for her himself, not calling on any guard or servant. His agbada flowed with grace as the wind caught its edges, the fine embroidery glistening under the rain. There was dignity in his presence, but also humility in the way he stretched out his hand to her. "Come," he said softly. "You don't need to fear here." Adissa's feet touched the marble steps at the entrance, her wet wrapper clinging tightly to her skin. She expected someone to scold her for dripping water in such a grand home, but instead, Oba's housekeeper rushed to bring towels and warm clothes. No one looked at her with suspicion or disgust. Instead, every face she met carried quiet respect, following Oba's example. Inside, the home was even more stunning. High ceilings, walls lined with art, and furniture that spoke of both wealth and taste. But it wasn't the beauty of the house that touched Adissa the most. It was the way Oba treated her as if she truly belonged there. He didn't ask her to explain herself. He didn't press her with questions. He simply said, "You must be tired. Rest first. Everything else can wait." Her chest tightened as emotions she had buried for years came rushing back. In that moment, for the first time in so long, Adissa felt seen, not as a burden, not as someone to be judged or discarded, but as a woman worthy of care and dignity. She lowered her head and whispered almost to herself, "Thank you." And in her heart, days slowly turned into weeks, and Adissa's life began to change in ways she never thought possible. At first, she moved like a shadow in Oba's house, quiet, careful, almost afraid to breathe too loudly. She carried the weight of her past on her shoulders, still hearing Chaik's cruel words in the back of her mind. But Oba never rushed her. He gave her space, offered her kindness, and treated her with the respect she had been denied for so long. Little by little, the wounds inside her heart started to heal. The house that once felt too big and too bright for her slowly became a place of comfort. Each morning, Adissa would sit by the wide windows, watching the sun rise over the gardens, sipping warm tea. The silence no longer frightened her. It gave her peace. Her body grew stronger again, her laughter, soft at first, began to return, and her smile, once lost, shone like the sun breaking through storm clouds. She started dressing differently too. No longer the woman whose clothes clung in shame and sorrow, Adissa began to wear bold African prints, flowing Ankara gowns, and bright head wraps that framed her beauty. The colors reflected her spirit: red for courage, yellow for hope, blue for peace. Each outfit felt like a new chapter, a reminder that she was no longer broken. Servants and visitors in the house often paused to admire her presence, whispering how her beauty carried both strength and grace. Oba noticed the change too, but he never said much. His eyes often spoke for him, filled with quiet admiration whenever he saw her smiling or laughing freely. He encouraged her gently, reminding her of her talents, her skills, her worth. For the first time in years, Adissa began to believe it herself. Her reflection in the mirror no longer showed a woman abandoned in the rain. It showed a survivor, a woman rising again. The storm had not destroyed her. It had revealed her strength. Every day as the sun touched her face, she knew her story was not ending. It was only beginning. Oba always believed in Adissa, even when she doubted herself. He often told her, "You have a gift, Adissa. Don't hide it. Let the world see what your hands can do." First she hesitated. She had spent so many years being told she was nothing that it felt strange to dream again. But Oba's steady encouragement lit a spark inside her. Slowly, she began to use her skills with fabrics and jewelry, skills she had once practiced quietly in the corner of her old home, never appreciated, never celebrated. With Oba's support, Adissa opened a small boutique in the heart of Okanda. The first day, she stood nervously by the door, dressed in a flowing Ankara gown she had made herself, wondering if anyone would come. To her surprise, women passing by stopped to admire the designs hanging in the window. The colors were bold, the cuts unique, and the jewelry sparkled with elegance. One customer turned into 5, then 10, and soon word began to spread. Day after day, her boutique filled with people from different corners of the city. Market women, office workers, even high society ladies. Everyone wanted a piece of Adissa's work. She poured her soul into every design, every stitch, every necklace. And the more people admired her craft, the more her confidence grew. Her boutique became more than just a shop. It became a place where women felt beautiful, powerful, and proud of their heritage. Adissa decorated the space with African art, soft music, and warm colors that made every visitor feel welcome. Customers often said, "Stepping in here feels like stepping into light." Slowly but surely, Adissa built her empire. She expanded her designs, hired workers, and even began training young girls who dreamed of becoming designers. The woman who once walked barefoot in the rain was now a businesswoman whose name carried respect all over Okanda. Every time she locked the boutique at night and looked at the glowing sign with her name on it, her heart swelled with gratitude. She had risen from. While Adissa's life was rising, Chaik's world was slowly collapsing around him. The man who once spoke with pride and arrogance now sat in silence most nights, staring at empty bottles on his table. His business, once booming, began to fall apart. Deals that seemed certain slipped through his fingers, partners who once praised him stopped answering his calls, and workers who feared his temper began to leave one by one. The empire he bragged about started to crumble like sand in the rain. First he thought it was just bad luck. He told himself things will turn around, they always do. But the days stretched into weeks and nothing improved. Creditors came knocking on his door, demanding money he could no longer pay. His once busy office grew quiet, the phones no longer ringing, the rooms empty. The same friends who used to drink with him, laugh with him, and flatter him were suddenly nowhere to be found. One by one they disappeared, leaving him alone in his downfall. At night, the silence of his house pressed heavily on him. The rooms that once echoed with shouting and pride now felt too large, too cold, too empty. He would sit in the dark, the sound of the rain outside bringing back memories he could not escape. He saw Adissa's face every time thunder struck. He remembered the way her eyes looked when he pushed her into the storm. He remembered her voice, trembling, pleading with him to stop. For the first time in his life, regret began to eat him alive. He realized he had thrown away the only person who truly cared for him. He whispered her name into the night, but only the walls answered back. Sleep no longer came easily. His heart felt heavy with loneliness, and his pride was no longer enough to keep him warm. Chaik began to understand a bitter truth. He had destroyed himself the moment he pushed Adissa into the rain. And now, no matter how much he wished, there was no going back. The cruelty he gave her had returned to him in a far harsher way. One hot afternoon in the busy market of Okanda, Chaik walked through the crowded streets with his head down. His clothes were no longer fine, his shoes worn out, and his face carried the marks of sleepless nights. He moved like a shadow among the traders, listening to the loud voices of sellers calling out prices and the noise of people bargaining. He was lost in thought, heavy with regret, when suddenly the sound of car horns made people step aside. A sleek black luxury car pulled up near the market entrance, its polished body shining under the sun. Chaik turned his head carelessly at first, but then his heart nearly stopped. The door of the car opened, and out stepped a woman wrapped in glowing Ankara gold, her outfit shining brighter than the day itself. Her geli was tied with elegance, her jewelry sparkling with pride, and her skin glowed with confidence. Two bodyguards rushed forward, opening space for her to walk through the crowd. It took only a moment for Chaik to realize it was Adissa, the same woman he had thrown into the rain, the same woman he had called nothing, now stood before him like a queen. His mouth went dry, his chest tightened, and for the first time, shame hit him harder than any storm ever could. People in the market whispered her name with respect, their eyes following her every step. "That's Adissa, the boutique owner. Her designs are everywhere now," someone said proudly. Chaik's ears burned. He wanted to vanish into the ground. Adissa did not see him at first. She walked gracefully, her face calm, her smile soft but powerful. When her eyes finally fell on him, she did not flinch. She simply looked at him, her gaze steady, her dignity shining brighter than gold. Chaik lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. In that moment he felt the sharp knife of truth. The woman he had despised was now untouchable. And he, the man who once boasted of power, stood broken and small in her presence. His heart dropped deep into his stomach, leaving on. Chaik could not hold himself back. The sight of Adissa walking like a queen through the market tore at his heart. He pushed his way through the crowd until he stood in front of her, his hands trembling, his voice breaking. "Adissa," he called softly at first, then louder. "Adissa, please wait." The bodyguards moved quickly, ready to block him, but she raised her hand gently, signaling them to step aside. She stood tall, her golden Ankara glowing in the sunlight, her eyes calm as she looked at the man who once threw her away. Chaik fell to his knees right there in the dust of the marketplace. His pride crumbled in front of everyone watching. His voice shook as tears filled his eyes. "Adissa, come back to me. I was a fool. I didn't know what I had. Please forgive me." The crowd went silent, traders and buyers pausing to watch the drama unfold. Some shook their heads, whispering, "Isn't that the man who threw her into the rain?" Adissa looked at him without anger, but also without softness. Her silence cut deeper than any words could. She remembered that stormy night, the door slamming, his voice shouting that she was nothing, the pain of walking barefoot in the rain. Those memories stood like a wall between them. She had built herself up from that pain, and she had no reason to return to it. Chaik reached out, his hands shaking. Please, Adissa. I can change. I will be better. Just give me one more chance. His voice cracked with desperation, but her steady eyes told him the truth. His chance was gone. Adissa finally spoke, her tone gentle but firm. Chaik, you broke me once. I will never allow you to break me again. Then she turned away, her steps graceful, her dignity untouched. Chaik's cries followed her, echoing in the marketplace, but her silence and steady walk said more than any words ever could. She was free, and he was left with nothing but regret. Chaik could not rest after seeing Adissa walk away from him in the marketplace. Her silence had pierced his soul, but something else burned inside him, curiosity. Who was the man behind her? Who had given her the power to rise so high? He asked around, listening to the whispers of traders and neighbors. The more he heard, the heavier his chest became. People spoke of a powerful entrepreneur, a respected man named Oba, the same man whose car she had stepped out of, the same man whose guards stood around her with loyalty. At first, Chaik refused to believe it. He told himself it was just rumors. But as days passed, the truth became clear. He saw them together one evening at a public event in Okanda. Adissa stood by Oba's side, her hand resting gently on his arm, her face glowing with joy. Oba looked at her with eyes full of pride and love, the kind of look Chaik had never once given her. The cameras flashed, people applauded, and whispers filled the air. That is Oba's wife, the woman he rescued that stormy night. The words struck Chaik like lightning. His knees weakened, his heart pounded, and his pride shattered into pieces. The same night he had pushed her into the rain, another man had picked her up, not to use her, not to hurt her, but to protect her. And now that same man was her husband. Chaik stood frozen as the truth settled in. The woman he once called worthless was now cherished by a man of honor. The woman he once shoved into the cold was now wrapped in love and dignity. The realization was too heavy. His lips trembled, his eyes blurred with tears he could no longer hide. He turned away from the crowd, holding his chest as if it would break open. The truth was merciless. He had lost Adissa forever, not to chance, not to fate, but to the consequences of his own cruelty. And knowing she now belonged to another man, a man who gave her the life he never valued, tore him apart in a way nothing else ever could. Chaik's house, once full of noise and pride, had become a place of silence and shadows. The furniture was worn, the walls dull, and the rooms too empty to hide his pain. He sat alone at night with nothing but the sound of crickets outside and the memories screaming in his head. Bottles lay scattered on the table, but even the drink could not numb the heaviness in his chest. Every time he closed his eyes he saw her, Adissa, standing tall, wrapped in gold, her smile shining as she walked beside Oba. Tears streamed down his face, hot and bitter. He buried his head in his hands, shaking as the weight of his regret crushed him. Why did I do it? Why did I throw her away? He whispered into the empty room. The image of that stormy night refused to leave him. Adissa's trembling voice, her wet face, the look of hurt in her eyes when he pushed her out into the rain. That was the night he destroyed everything, and now he was paying the price. He could not forget the way Oba had looked at her. With love, with pride, with the kind of respect Chaik never gave. The thought tormented him. The woman he had once called nothing was now untouchable, living a life far greater than his own. And he was left with nothing but the echo of his cruelty. Sometimes he walked through the market just to catch a glimpse of her from afar, but every time he saw her surrounded by guards and admirers, his heart broke again. He knew he could never reach her, never undo what he had done. Alone in his broken house, Chaik wept like a man who had lost not only his wife but also his soul. His tears were not just of sadness, they were of deep regret, the kind that no apology could ever wash away. The storm he had thrown her into had lifted her higher, and it had drowned him instead. Adissa never wasted her time mocking Chaik, or throwing his mistakes back in his face. She had no need for revenge. The life she lived now was enough to answer every insult, every cruel word, every moment of pain he once gave her. She walked with dignity, her head held high, and her silence spoke louder than any insult ever could. In public, people often compared the two without her saying a word. Chaik had become a man hidden in the corners of Okanda, struggling with debts, his clothes faded, his pride long gone. Adissa, on the other hand, moved like light through the city, owning boutiques, attending events, speaking with leaders, and inspiring women everywhere. When she entered a room, people stood straighter. When she spoke, they listened. Her life had become a testimony, a quiet but powerful victory that needed no explanation. Sometimes their paths crossed. Chaik would see her from a distance, his heart tightening, his throat dry. He expected her to mock him, to throw his past cruelty in his face. But Adissa never did. She simply looked at him with calm eyes, nodded politely, and carried on. That silent grace cut deeper than anger ever could. It told him she had moved far beyond him, that he no longer had the power to touch her life. Her victory wasn't in making him cry. It was in showing the world that she had risen from the storm he tried to bury her in. She built her empire. She healed her heart. And she found love in a place he never imagined. Chaik's downfall was his own doing, and her success was her quiet answer. Adissa knew strength did not always roar. Sometimes it simply shone. And hers shone so brightly that even the darkest parts of her past could no longer overshadow it. She didn't need to prove anything to Chaik. Her life was proof enough that dignity and courage will always shine brighter than cruelty. The story of Adissa spread across Okanda like wildfire. From the busy markets to the quiet compounds, people whispered about the woman who had once been thrown into the storm but returned stronger than ever. Traders told it as they arranged their goods. Mothers repeated it to their daughters, and even men used it as a warning to their friends. Never break a woman who knows her worth. They spoke of the night she was pushed into the rain, barefoot and helpless, and how a stranger stopped to lift her out of her pain. They told of how that stranger, Oba, became not just her savior but her partner, her husband, and her greatest supporter. Her journey from rejection to respect, from sorrow to strength, touched every heart that heard it. In the salons, women wore Adissa's fabrics proudly, saying, "She made this, the woman who turned her tears into gold." In schools, teachers used her name as an example of courage. Even children in the streets could be heard chanting her story, their eyes wide with admiration. As for Chaik, his name became a warning. People remembered him not for his past wealth, but for his cruelty, for the day he let pride destroy everything. His fall was a lesson, but Adissa's rise was the true message that lived on. Her life became more than just her own. It became a tale that inspired a city, reminding everyone that storms may break the body, but they cannot destroy the spirit of a woman who refuses to bow.